Lewis Hamilton is hoping that Mercedes will reduce the number of tests run on his W13 car during Grand Prix weekends after the team made progress in Canada. The Briton returned to the podium for the first time since the season-opening Bahrain Grand Prix, finishing third with a car he described as undrivable during practice. His complaints came as the team was conducting yet another experiment on his car in the hopes of unlocking some additional performance. This season, Hamilton has frequently volunteered as a guinea pig for Mercedes, testing new parts on his car, experiments that have frequently left him trailing teammate George Russell. Maybe the second half of the season, George can do the experiments, Hamilton joked as he spoke with members of the media. Nevertheless, the seven-time world champion is hopeful that progress in Montreal will result in fewer experiments and more trouble-free track time during practice sessions. We're just trying to progress as a team. I think we'll be a little bit more cautious on doing too many experiments, as it really does hinder you through the weekend, especially if you only have FP1 and FP2 in the dry. You don't get an FP3. I think there are lots of learnings from the weekend and improvements that we can make moving forwards, but we had great pace. It's so nice to see. It's not always been the case with this car. Hamilton had set the team the target of delivering him a car capable of fighting for race wins in time for the British Grand Prix, which is now under 2 weeks away. During the final laps of the Montreal Grand Prix, the 37-year-old briefly believed his request had been granted as he prepared for a shootout with Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz. However, the W13 lacks the speed to truly challenge the frontrunners, though Silverstone is expected to be a track more suited to Mercedes' strengths. Moving on to Silverstone, and such an important race for us, and for me, I really just want to be in a battle with these guys. At the end of the race, when the safety car came in and we started again, I was hoping that I could be in the fight. The dream was that I could keep in that battle with them and find a way, but they were rapid. But we'll get there. However, it appears that the Silver Arrows will need to take a significant step forward if they want to compete for a win at their driver's home Grand Prix. Still, there are some encouraging signs for the team. Mercedes has had a difficult start to the 2022 season, with its W13 experiencing both bouncing and bottoming out. The phenomenon has been so severe on its cars that complaints from George Russell and Lewis Hamilton about the physical pain they're experiencing prompted the FIA to intervene to help. Nonetheless, following a reassuring Canadian Grand Prix weekend in which the team was perhaps its most competitive in terms of pace so far this season, finishing third and fourth, team boss Toto Wolff has revealed how the squad's focus has shifted. He believes that the Montreal weekend demonstrated that the porpoising issue, in which the car moves up and down as load increases on the straight, has been eliminated as a result of the team's efforts. The issue for Mercedes now is how much the car strikes the ground when the circuit is bumpy, as a result of the super stiff and low ride height setup that was required to get its car working properly. I think, in a way, we have dissected what we define as porpoising or bouncing, and it is that the porpoising, which is the aerodynamic movement of the car, I think that's solved, and we got on top of this around Barcelona. It is more that the ride of the cars is really what causes the comments of the drivers. The cars are simply too stiff, the curb ride is bad, the bump ride is bad, and I would say that now, with dissecting this problem, you can tackle it better. Wolff also believes Mercedes' progress on porpoising has placed its car in a similar setup window to rivals, who also appear to be suffering from how stiff things must be run. What we see in the cars is just the stiffness. You look at some of the slow motions from the two leading cars and the Alpines, you see that they are bouncing off the curb in a very hard way. This is what the drivers actually complained about, the stiffness of the car. This is something we need to look at, how we can reduce the impact. And of course, the smoother the track, the better. The lower the curbs, the less we see this phenomenon. With Canada highlighting that Mercedes still needed to bring more performance to the car, Wolff says the key to making progress was to try to unlock more speed from the car at a wider range of ride heights. I think we just need to put more load in the car, more downforce, and equally do that with a car that is not as low on the ground as we expected. It's a clear direction. You can see the cars going higher, and this is where we need to find the performance. However, it cannot be overstated admitted that the W13 still has some gremlins. According to George Russell, every time the team makes a change to the car, another problem arises. He adds that each track presents its own set of challenges for the engineers, so he has no idea what to expect at the next race in Silverstone. I'd like to think the high-speed nature should suit us slightly more, but there's no guarantees. Every single track we've gone to, it's sort of thrown an unknown at us. And we're facing different issues every single race weekend, so I'd like to think we'd be more competitive, but I really don't know. When asked to elaborate, he commented, "With just the overall car, we sort of evolve one issue and we fall into another trap. Porpoising has been solved, but then when you run the car close to the ground, we're hitting the ground quite aggressively. There doesn't seem to be any sweet spot at the moment." Mercedes played around with the ride height in Montreal, but Russell said it didn't seem to affect performance, as he finished 4th at the Canadian Grand Prix, helped by Red Bull's Sergio Perez is retiring and Ferrari's Charles Leclerc finishing 5th after starting from the back due to grid penalties. "We've run high, we've run low, and the performance hasn't improved or decreased, and the stiffness and the bottoming hasn't really changed, surprisingly, I think. Even when you run high, you have different effects. When you run low, you have different effects. It's a really tricky iteration of car to get on top of." He went on to admit that, unsurprisingly, the team has still a lot of work ahead of them. "Yesterday looked very promising at times, but the actual pace deficit to the front-running car was still pretty substantial. So even though it looked on paper to have been a bit of an improvement, we're still a long way from where we need to be. So we haven't made a huge amount of progress as yet. But we're still working as hard as we can to close the gap." Another factor to consider is the involvement of the sport's governing body, which could influence how the battle for the front unfolds. The FIA issued a technical directive ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix weekend to protect drivers from severe bouncing. They did so following a race in Azerbaijan that left several drivers, including Lewis Hamilton and Daniel Ricciardo, in pain. Red Bull has the bouncing problem under control, with Christian Horner seeing a mid-season rule change as beneficial to teams that have yet to address the issue. However, Häkkinen, the two-time Formula One world champion with McLaren, praised the FIA for acting quickly and listening to drivers on the issue. "It is good to see the FIA listening to concerns about driver safety. As usual, the best way to get to sort it out is to measure what's happening and then make some decisions based on what the data shows. Of course, some teams want to make changes, especially if the porpoising is making their cars uncompetitive. But once the FIA, teams and drivers can get an accurate picture of what's really happening, the right steps can be taken." After threatening disqualification for cars that bounce too frequently or too severely, the FIA decided to back down until more data on the issue was gathered. Some teams still made changes to their cars, as per the technical directive, with Mercedes ending the weekend with Lewis Hamilton on the podium for the first time since the season opener in Bahrain. They continue to be the only team on the grid without a retirement, with both Hamilton and teammate George Russell posting consistent results throughout the season. Mercedes has the one thing both Red Bull and Ferrari lack: reliability. They're also quick enough to be consistently the third fastest car on the track, and able to pick up good points whenever Red Bull or Ferrari have any issues. This looked like a step forwards in terms of race setup. The team have been trying new things on the car, sometimes making it very difficult for both drivers, but Sunday looked positive. What are your thoughts? Is Mercedes' reliability going to play a role in the championship race, or are they out of it for sure? What are your predictions for Silverstone? Will Mercedes be able to challenge Ferrari and Red Bull for the victory? We'd love to hear from you in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and don't forget to click the bell button to be notified of future videos.